Hey, Alexia, how are you?
Hey Foster, I'm fine, and you?
I'm doing wonderfully. Thank you for asking. This is part 4 of a series that we are talking about the rules of language learning. We did not create these rules. A British chap named Olly Richards.
British mate.
Yeah, do you know what a chap is?
Chapman.
What?
Chapman.
Yeah, chap is just like it's what British people say for like dude, man.
I just created a last name.
Yeah, that Chapman is a popular last name in the US, at least. Okay, off topic really fast. So, if you have not listened to the episodes from earlier this week, we were talking about the rules of language learning presented by this British guy named Olly Richards. So, if you have not listened to that, you probably want to start there. But today we are talking about one of my favorite things. Rule number 4 from Olly. He says, don't learn grammar until you need it.
Yes.
Alexia,
Oh.
first impressions.
Well, my first impression is that in any traditional English course, you're gonna be learning grammar as like the most important part.
Yeah.
And if you ask me how did I pass during the exams and things like that, I would say I don't know because I don't remember any of the grammar that I studied.
In Portuguese?
Both.
Or in English, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense when I speak. That's the most important part.
Yeah, you just intuitively understand. Yeah, so Olly starts with the analogy of learning piano. And I make the analogy of sports or learning a musical instrument a lot when we are talking about language learning. But more or less, he says, imagine you want to learn to play the piano and you have a piano teacher. And in the first class, she explains to you, like, okay, this is a piano. This is how it works. This is how we tune the piano. In the second class, she starts talking about all of the different keys and different scales and musical theory. And then that continues for like 2 years, and you never really sit down and play the piano.
Yeah. You never put in practice
Right.
what you're learning, entre aspas. How do you say in quotation, right?
Yeah, in quotations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you put it in the context of learning a musical instrument, it seems ridiculous. You will not learn how to play the piano just simply studying musical theory for 2 years. But for some reason in language learning, we do this all the time. You know, a lot of my students have studied for like 5 or 10 years and have never had a conversation with a native speaker. And that's not their fault. That's just the way the system is structured.
Yeah. And I learned when I was studying French as well. Grammar was the biggest part as well, and it was very similar to Portuguese. And I was having so much trouble to understand like passé composé and things like that, that I have no idea. It was like 3 years of my life in a trash because
In the trash.
in the trash because I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that I can speak French nowadays, but I can speak English. This happens the same thing.
Yeah. So naturally, we are not trying to say that grammar is not important. I do not think that Olly is making this point either. But what he is really claiming, and what I agree with,
And we already said it
Oh.
200 times around here.
I say it legitimately. I say this probably 25 times a day,
Mm-hmm.
giving feedback and to our students, that grammar is only important when you are ready to learn that grammar, when you need to learn a specific grammar point or structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And when would be that point?
Yes. So Olly talked about something very interesting. So this is really nerdy linguistics, he talks about the zone of proximal development, which the technical definition is the zone of proximal development is the difference between what a learner can do without help and what they can't do without a teacher's assistance. So essentially, this is just a fancy, chic learning model to say just the next step, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, Alexia, you speak really well. You're an advanced speaker. If you need to learn a new word or a phrase, you can do that totally by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you really want to completely change your accent and intonation to be more similar to my parents, for example,
Mm-hmm. Southern accent.
yeah, that is a big jump, and that is outside of what we would call your zone of proximal development. That is where you would need someone to help you with that process.
Yeah.
Cool.
So when we are talking about like beginners or not that advanced students, I'm pretty sure that there are people here who listens to us
People who listen.
who listen to us who are in this meião, nessa meiuca,
Yeah,
in the middle of
in the middle of that mess. Yeah.
they would be like asking themselves, how do I do then? Like, how do I know if I need help or if I don't need help? Because those people are studying by themselves at home.
Yeah. So the easiest test to really understand where your grammar is and what you need to learn is with conversation. So conversation is the perfect benchmark test for everything. I think that all of these standardized tests should be thrown in the trash. And if you have an interview or anything to get a visa, a work application, conversation is really what tests your English. So, for example, an intermediate learner, if they're speaking in a conversation and they say, "Oh, hey, how are you?" And then the person responds, "How you are," instead of "How are you?"
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, the native speaker will understand you, but they will probably be like, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" and try to kind of correct you in a nice way. That is a perfect sign that, okay, maybe I need to think about the grammatical structures of asking questions in
Or
English.
uh, that point that they either understand you or they don't. That's it. Because if the conversation doesn't flow, you're not talking to the other person like you don't know how to deal with that, is because you need help. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But I do think, especially for beginners, just ignore grammar in the beginning because it will complicate things. It will slow you down. Or something that I really like to say to our students a lot is do not ask why, ask how.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I was giving feedback yesterday and someone said, I have lived in the US since 2011 or something, which is totally fine. Grammatically, it's correct. But I said, the most natural way to say this in English would probably be, I have been living in the US since 2011. And don't ask why we do that. First, you should ask, okay, how do I do that? What'd you say? I have been living. Okay, let me practice that. Train that. And then when you really start understanding it and it's just in your head, you probably will not have to ask why because you will understand intuitively.
And that's a good point because the next episode is the perfect link for this.
Oh, yeah. We did that on purpose.
Yes.
Kind of.
So, are we good?
Yeah. So we have talked about this before. Do not ignore grammar. Don't think that we are saying just, I'm pretty much saying that Yeah.
No, but grammar is important, but you have to know when to learn it. To learn it, when to put it in your life is not the most important part. The most important part is to communicate, and then you're gonna see what are your mistakes and what you need to really focus on.
Yeah. I mean, when students are really, really focused on grammar and they will not stop, like,
They forget everything else.
yeah. But for example, if I have a student who's like, I need to learn the present perfect, and I'm like, oh, I have traveled to the beach. They say, why do you say I have traveled and I've not traveled? And then I say, okay, think in Portuguese. Viajei para a praia. If I just say, why'd you say that? And why did you not say, ah, eu viajava? And why did you not say, tinha viajado? No Brazilians, except for linguistics, can answer that question.
No, and it's like 1 + 1 is equal to 2. You don't
1 + 1 = 2.
you don't have to why, but how. My dad used to say to me that he was horrible with maths
Uh-huh.
because of that. He was always asking himself like, why is that? Why do we do that? Why p number? Pi is like that. And he was always horrible with
Yeah.
maths. So,
Yeah. So can we end on one funny note, Alexia?
uh-huh.
We are talking about the rules of language learning presented by a British guy named Olly Richards. But here in America, the land of the free, we just say math.
But in British English, it's maths.
They do say maths.
There you go. Britannia.
Yeah. Okay. I think that is
Yeah.
a good and weird place to
It's
end the
incredible
episode.
that I still have things from my childhood when I learn English.
Yeah, it's awesome. But you are in the United States, so speak American or leave. I'm joking. Sweet people. Have a lovely day. We will see you tomorrow.